Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome back to today's Daf, Bava Basra, Daf Gimel. We are holding right on top, Lishna Achrina Amrila. So this is version number 2, a totally different starting point with respect to interpreting our Mishnah. So perhaps let's page back to our Mishnah here. Daf Bezim and Aleph. Hashutfin sheratzu lasos mechitza b'chatzer. So we have two shutafin. They have a chatzer, which they jointly owned. Rashi explains a chatzer is a front yard, a heavily commonly used area, like a driveway meant for unloading, meant for uploading. They decided to build a wall, to make a mechitza. What did they do? They proceed boinin as a kaisel be'emtza, and they use the appropriate, building and construction material as per the local bylaws, the local minhag, the local, building practices. So according to the first approach, which was learned yesterday on Daf Beis and Beis, you can't force your neighbor to build a wall with you. You can do it yourself. You can build it on your own side and pay for it. But you can't force him to contribute. Why? Because hezek re'iyah, privacy, as important as it is, lav shmei hezek. It doesn't really constitute actual harm and damage. You can't really use that as a basis for compelling your neighbor to build a wall, to contribute financially and property-wise to the wall. Hezek re'iyah lav shmei hezek. So the reason why they're building is because it was mutually agreed upon by the partners. It was by mutual consent. And that's why they're proceeding. Lishna Achrina Amrila. But here comes version number 2 in terms of interpreting the Mishnah from a totally different starting point, the other direction. Savarua the Bnei HaYeshiva figured my mechitza plukta. When the Mishnah says they decided to lasis mechitza, means they decided to divide the property. Why would they have to decide to divide? Why would it have to be by mutual consent? The Gemara later will explain for us. We're speaking about a very small, a real small property, which doesn't really justify a division. It's not. If you divide it, it's not useful. It's not really functional. It has less than 4 ames per potential, party. Let's say it's only 7 ames in size, so that you can't force him to split it because then it becomes dysfunctional. It's too small to be useful. So they decided by mutual consent to split this small-sized chatzer. My mechitza plukta. As we find that the lashon mechitza can relate to dividing, to divisions, to appropriations. This is why the Milchama of Midian, they returned with much loot, and they divided, they appropriated, they gave part of it to the Eda, to the nation. So mechitza relates to making a division. And the Mishnah proceeds. Okay, once we got to stage 1, that it was mutually agreed to divide the property. So once we have that agreement, boinen es hakoisel ba'al korchen. So now phase 2 is, okay, now hezek re'iyah kicks in. Once you have 2 separate, distinct properties, now you can force your neighbor to build a wall. Why? Because according to today's approach, hezek re'iyah is significant enough. That justifies compelling your neighbor to contribute to the wall. Alma hezek re'iyah, a lack of privacy, shmei hezek, that's significant enough to obligate him to pair up with you and build a wall. Well, my mechitza guda. How do you know this is the correct pshat in the Mishnah? Maybe we'll go to yesterday's pshat. Hashutfin sheratzu lasos mechitza. Mechitza means a partition. They mutually agreed upon the building of the wall. It was by mutual consent. Because otherwise you can't force him. And we find that the lashon mechitza relates to a partition, to a wall. Sanya, the snan, mechitza sakerim, right? We had this yesterday. You have a fence around the vineyard, shnifritza, it got breached. On the other side of the fence you have a grain field. Now we have an issue of mixing up the 2 species. And if it grows in this fashion, there's kilayim, it becomes asur. So his fence falls apart. The grain fellow next door yells at him, Arm like please, fix up your fence. Okay, so he did it. Nifritza, it happened again, Arm Legadar. He sends him another request. He fixed it again. And then the third time, he just gave up. Okay, I'm giving up. But like God is not fixing it anymore. And now if the items grew a bit in this mixed up manner, Hareza Kiddush, it affects it. It makes it usr. Kiddush means it's separate. It could be on a positive note, on a negative note, right? By Kalayim, the Pasuk uses the Lashon Pentikdash, so that's why the Brisa chose that Lashon. It makes it usr. V'chayev b'achar yusa, and the vineyard fellow is responsible. He takes achrayus for what happened. Bottom line, you see that Lashon Mechitza relates to partition. That's what happened in our Mishnah. There was a consensus. They agreed to build that wall. The time of the Ratzu. And that's the only reason why they'll build it, because they decided to do so. If there's no mutual consent, so you can't force your neighbor. Alma has a kriya, because Hezekriya is not enough of a justification. So maybe that's the correct shot. How do you know to take the first approach? Maybe take this approach, which incidentally is yesterday's approach. So it's basically almost the same Gemara yesterday, step by step, but just in reverse, right? Yachi says the Gemara, if that would be the case, if that would be the correct shot in the Mishnah, that they agreed to build a wall, so the Mishnah begins, okay, they decided to build a wall, and then what do? They build the wall. Why that repetition? Build the wall. The Mishnah should have simply said they built it, the it that we spoke about before, that they agreed to build. Apparently that's not what the Mishnah means. Elamai, so what's the other alternative? Plukta. They agreed to divide the property. And once you divide it, phase 2 is, okay, Hezekriya kicks in, you must build a wall. If that would be the correct shot in the Mishnah, again we have that grammatical issue. Sheratzu lasis mechitza. They wanted to make a mechitza. Mechitza means to divide. They make a division. I mean, sheratzu lasis mechitza. The Mishnah simply said they wanted lachsis to split. What does lasis mechitza mean? Well, says the Gemara, Kedam Rinshi. Sometimes people speak like that. Come along. Na'avid plukta will make a separation. Will make a split. So it can work. Asks the Gemara. Okay. So now we're working with the notion that Hezek Riyah is Hezek, right? Vi Hezek Riyah Shmei Hezek. If that's the case, Ma Irya Ratzu. So here comes a very simple question. Why do we need consensus? Afilu Lo Ratzu Nami, even if there was no consensus. It's Hezek Riyah. Right? Right? Even if one of these partners decided to split the property, the same exact halacha would apply. They split it and they build a wall, right? Well, Amar Ba'asi, Amar B'Yechanan, Mishnah Seinu. The yard over here in our Mishnah was a very small sized property. There's no legal obligation to divide it. It's too small to be functional for both parties if it was split. And that's why Behuda Ratzu, provided they agreed to split it. Once they split it, now you have two distinct properties. Now the next halacha kicks in. Hezekriya obligates a wall. Asks the Gemara, so what's the main point of the Mishnah? That even though it's too small to be legally considered a divisible property, but if they agree to do so, then they can proceed. Tanina, we have a Mishnah later on that discusses this very same point. When do we say we don't split properties? They don't agree to do so. If there's a mutual agreement, if it's very small, you can split it. So why do we need to repeat the same halacha twice in two missions? If only from that halacha, I would say, yeah, even if it's small than the required size, and they decide to split it in any case. But Masipas Bam, you split it with pegs on the floor. You make a property delineation, that's it. But we don't see anything about privacy issues, anything about protecting from Hezekriya. And that's why we need our Mishnah, Kamash Mon Hacha, Kaisel. That's why the Mishnah repeats the halacha by us to stress the point that a wall will be erected to protect from Hezekriya. Okay, if you listen to her, so then just mention our Mishnah, which contains all these elements. And forget about the other Mishnah. Why do we have to mention the other Mishnah? Say, well, there's another halacha in that Mishnah which is unique. The next part of the Mishnah there is let's say two people inherited a holy scroll. They want to split it now. One scroll. No, you can't do that. Even though there's mutual consent to split it, you can't split it. It's not covered. Okay, there was another version of this back and forth here. So from here till the end of the brackets is pretty much a back and forth, which is a slightly different version of what we're going to have after the brackets. And also before the brackets, sort of like a new mix of a shakla v'tarya. Okay, now let's say they agree to split this undersized property. Okay, let him change his mind. Now it's costing him money, he's have to pay for the wall. Too late. They made a kinyan, they made a chalipim, and he gave him his handkerchief in exchange for. Well, says the Gemara, now I have a kasha. Why does the Mishnah have to focus on a case where it's very small and they decide to split it regardless? Just focus on your classic standard case. It's a big place. It can be properly divided. And even if there was no mutual consent to split it, I can force him to divide it because it's big enough to be divided. Why don't we just dwell on a classic standard case? The answer is, if the Mishnah would have focused on a standard case where the chatzar is big enough to be properly divided, and you can proceed even though there's no mutual consent, right? And I can force you to split the property, and now that takes us to phase 2. Once it's divided, I can force you to build a wall. So now there's room for mistake, for misunderstanding. I would perhaps think, yeah, that's true in this case, because I'm compelling you from day one to split, to divide, to build, right? But let's say she'ein baden chalukah. Theoretically, if the place is too small to be considered a legally divisible property, and I convinced you, and we mutually consented to split the place up. So even if they decide to do so, you can't force them to build a wall. You know why? And perhaps the svara is that you can say, look, I agreed to split the place. Okay, fine, but not to build a wall. None of it's going to cost me, right? Kamashwan, that's the point of the Mishnah. No. Even in that case, it wasn't big enough to begin with. They convinced each other to split it regardless. So now we have 2 distinct properties. Now, phase 2 kicks in. Okay, I want privacy. I can force you to contribute. Kamashma asks the Gemara, Omimat says, Amris Hachi, how could you suggest that the Mishnah is speaking about this type of situation? Vaktani Seifa. We have another Mishnah which discusses this very same halacha. Why the repetition? When do we say we don't divide? If they're not agreeable. If they're both agreeable, they split even the smallest of small. We're assuming it means with a proper wall. No, perhaps it just means small pegs on the full markers. And that's what we need our Mishnah to tell you, no, it's a wall. Well, if that's the case, listen high. We should just learn our Mishnah. Listen high without the other Mishnah. So if it's trichle, well, there's a special twist in that Mishnah which is not found in our Mishnah, which is the Kisvei HaKodesh, right? The Kisvei HaKodesh, when it pertains to Holy Scrolls, even if they both agree to split it, it's not covered to cut the Sefer into halves. Okay, so how are we approaching our Mishnah? We're speaking about a small area which isn't typically divided, right? And they decided to divide it. Once it's divided, they can force each other to build that privacy partition. Well, if that's the case, so what? They agreed to divide it. They can change their mind. It's costing me money now. Shekana miyad, they made a kinyan. Who cares they made a kinyan? Kinyan dvarim ba'amu. We're going with the kinyan chalipin, right? So let's say I give you an item in exchange, right, for that item. That typically pertains to tangible items, right? Like we had in the Mishnah over there, right? Hamachlif para b'chamor, I swamp a donkey for, right? But here we're speaking about just a verbal discussion, a verbal commitment. How could you make chalipin on an intangible type? Oh, what happened was they chose. Each fellow chose his respective part of this chatzar. I'm taking this side, you're taking that side, I'm taking the east, you're taking the west. And that's what the chalipim was. I'm exchanging, I'm swapping my part in your half for your part of my half. And this way, there's something tangible being swapped with a kinyan, which solidifies it without ability to cancel. Ravashi Amar another option. They decided to divide. Right, Reuben walked onto his side of the property and took a shovel and dug, made a kinyan chazaka, and he did the same. And his other neighbor did the same. In which case, it's a done deal. Okay, so let's just summarize. Bottom line, it's a bit back and forthy, right? A lot of details, but the bottom line here is Hezekriya. Is it something significant enough that justifies compelling a neighbor to contribute to building a wall? So we have two approaches. The first approach, which was yesterday, the answer is no. Rather, the case in our missions where they agreed to build a wall. It was done by mutual consent. Whereas today's Gemara takes on a different approach. They agreed to divide a mini property. And once they got to that point, now the next phase kicks in. Hezekriya requires them, and he can force his neighbor to contribute to the wall. Okay, what materials do we use? What does the wall consist of? Makam Shanaga Livnois, we have the Gvil, we have the Gazes, and the Gemara will explain each one as to what it is. Gvil is the Avnei de Meshapia, the unchipped stones, meaning the rough stones which have pointed edges and jagged sides, so they are actually bigger than the Avnei Gazes, which are Avnei de Meshapia, more smooth, chipped stones. That's why the Gvil is a 6 tefach item, the Gazes a 5 tefach item. The Chsiv, as we find that Gazes relates to stones which have been treated. Kolei lavanim yikaris kimidas Gazes, right, they were used by the Beis HaMikdash. And it says Megoirarais b'Megera, right, they were chopped with these tools, right, so we see that they're chipped. Next on the line is Kvisin. What is Kvisin? Arche, half bricks. So you have a brick which is 3 tefach inside, you split it into 2, 1.5, 1.5, and you stick a tefach of mortar in between, and that's the Kvisin structure. Finally, we have Levanim, those are Livni standard bricks, 3 tefach in size. Amalei Rabba Braid the Rav Ravashi. How do we know this? How do we know that the first item, the Gvil item, is a 6 tefach stone because of the jagged edges? The reason why it's a tefach bigger than the next one on the list, Lemursh the karnas to allow for the jagged corners and edges. Duma paga the gazes. So maybe really it's all the same material. Gazes is 5 tefach, right? And Gvil relates to a wall consisting of half gazes. So gazes is 5. You split into 2, 2.5, 2.5. A tefach of mortar to hold it together gets you 6, right? Paga the gazes. And the reason why it ends up being a tefach wider is for the mortar. Lebeni Urbu is for the mortar between the rows. Just as we say by the bricks, the same idea. Kvis not really archi. They're half bricks, held together by mortar, which adds to the thickness. Levanin, those are standard livni, bricks which are 3 tefach in size. V'aytefach Yisera, the reason why Kvisin ends up being a tefach wider is because of the mortar. Leveni Urbi between the rows. So how do we know that we have it right? Amar Lacey says that Tamech, according to you, Kvisin Archiminol. How do we even know that Kvisin are the half bricks in this arrangement? How do we know this is true? Apparently we have this from our teachers who told us the exact, described to us exactly what these things are. So then Gvil Nami, same thing with Gvil, Avnei de Meshapia, that Gvil is a reference to these jagged stones. That's also been taught by our Rabbeim, Gemara, Gmirila. Okay, Ikadamrit, there's another version of this discussion. How do we know that Kvisin relates to the half bricks held together by mortar? And the reason why it's extra tefach in size, the Beni Urbi, because of the mortar between the rows. Perhaps my Kvisin, maybe Kvisin relates to stones which are jagged. The reason why they're wider, because of the extra corners. As we say by Gvil, same idea. They're really supersized jagged stones. Gazes, on the other hand, the Avnei de Meshapyan, they're cut down more smoothly. The reason why Gvil is wider by a tefach, the Murshik the Karnas, is because of the jagged edges. So how do we know the correct interpretation of these terms? Amar Leisi said, Tamech, according to you, Gvil. How are you so sure that Gvil is Avnei de Meshapyan, the jagged, unsmooth stones? How do we know? It was taught to us. Hachanami here as well by the Kvisin. Gemara, Gmirla, the correct translation was handed over to us by our teachers. Okay, Amar Abaye, Shmamina, we learn from here, Kol bein ur b'tefach, the thickness of mortar, typically placed between rows, should be a tefach in width. And that's what's learned from our Mishnah. Hanimila Batina, that's only true when you put tina, like a cement. Aval berichsa, but if it's richsa, Rashi says small pebbles, small stones, that's evidently not as strong and durable, so there we need more. Right? But you need more than a tefach. There's another version, Hanimila, when do we say a tefach is required? That's only berichsa with the weaker material. But a stronger material, you don't need a tefach, even less is enough to stick them together. Ask the Gemara, remember the begozes. So what's the bottom line? The Mishnah speaks about building a wall, which we know is 4 amas in height. How do we know that? We're going to see in the Hayam and Al Be'ez Hashem. So 4 amas is what protects one's privacy, because the person is about 3 amas, and you need a little extra just in case he's tiptoeing. Bottom line, 4 amas is required, and you're building it out of, let's take the gozes option, right? Which is 5 tefach in width. Remember, do you mean to say that you meant to follow this? This is the correct building formula. The begozes, when gozes material is used, the kol daled amos goiva, when you're trying to reach 4 amma in height, when your structure is 4 amas high, you have your pussy. Pussy means the width. If the width equals chamsha 5 kai, it's a properly structured structure. Eloi, but if it's not 5 tefach wide, that's too thin. It can't support itself. Loi kai, it's not going to last. Is that what you mean to say? Let's take a look at our Beis Hamikdash. We have a special wall called Amma Traksin. The Amma Traksin was situated between the Heichal, between what we call the Kodesh, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The reason why I got its name Traksin, going to one Pshan Taisus, Traksin, perhaps in Greek, is a joint word. Trak, sin. Trak means inside, sin means outside, because they weren't sure really what status that space had, what part of the Kodesh or part of Kodesh HaKadoshim. So it got its name Traksin. Amma Traksin. So in the Beis Hamikdash, we had an Amma Traksin, which was actually a wall, right? And it was an Amma wide, which is 6 tefachim, and was very tall. The Havya Gavoya Tlasna Masa was 30 amas high. But I have a Pussy Elashis Pushchi, and it was merely 6 tefach wide. And it lasted a very long time, right? 410 years. So apparently you don't have to have this type of formula. You don't have to follow this proportional formula of 5 tefach width for every 4 amma high. Answers the Gemara. The kiva the ika tefach is seira koi. Remember, you added an extra tefach to the width. In our Mishnah we speak about 5. Here it's 6 tefach wide, right? It's an amma. So that extra tefach in width adds so much more support to the wall in a very disproportionate amount. It's not like for every 4 amma in height you have to add another 5. No, once you add a little bit, that gives you up to 30. Reinforces the whole wall and allows for a much higher build. Okay, once we're on the topic of the Amma Traksin, asks the Gemara an interesting question. Why do we find that only in the Beis Hamikdash Harishan did it feature an Amma Traksin, but not in the Beis Hamikdash Hasheni? There we had a double curtain, right? One on each side of the Amma. No wall. Or B'Mikdash Hasheni, my time a while Ovid Amma Traksin. What happened to the Amma Traksin? Answers the Gemara, Ki koi, but lost in koi. Because it wouldn't have survived, it wouldn't have been, the structure wouldn't have been strong enough to support itself. It only works until 30 amma, which is the height of the Beis Hamikdash Harishan. Tfei loy koi, you can't make it taller than that. How do we know the second Mikdash was taller? Meaning the actual space between the floor and the ceiling of the Heichal was more than 30. The Chsiv, as the Pasuk says, Gadol Yeh, right? We have the Nevuah, right? The Chagai. Gadol Yeh Kvoid Habayis Hazeh Ha'achra Min Harishan, the glory of the second Beis Hamikdash will surpass the first one. And we have a Machlekes. What exactly? In what way did it surpass? Rav Shmuel. Rav, some say it was Machlekes in Rabbi Yechon Abelazar. Chada one says B'Biyam. was a more impressive building, a taller building. One says it lasted longer in terms of years, and they're both right. They're both correct. In terms of height, that the space, that same space was really 40 amos instead of 30. In terms of longevity, it lasted 420 years. Okay, that explains why they couldn't build a wall of this size. Okay, let's combine. So you say the 6 tefach wall can only support a 30 amma high wall. Okay, so make it 30 amas in height, and the rest you complete it with a curtain. Says Nami. Even when we say that a 30 amma wall can support itself, Nami agav tikra maziva. It's only because it had a tikra maziva, proper roof on top, holding it up on top. Havakoi below tikra below maziva, but without a ceiling holding it down, supporting it, a freestanding wall havakoi wouldn't last. And since the ceiling was 40 amas high, so the wall of 30 amma high would be freestanding. You can't do that. Okay, says the Gemara. Okay, do it as high as you could. So build the wall as high as it's sustainable. And the rest do a curtain. Abaye says no, you can't do it this way. It's either all building or all curtain. Gemira, we have a Kabbalah. Either make it fully solid. Is a fully curtain. Why? Either you pick the binyan option, Mimigdash, comparable to the first place of Migdash, which was a real wall. Or you can choose a curtain, Mishkan, like they had in the Mishkan. So you can do it one way or the other. You can't have a combination. Asks the Gemara. We speak about widths in the Mishnah. 6 tefach, 5 tefach, right? We know that they used to coat the wall with some sort of waterproofing, cement or whatever. So when we speak about width, is it inclusive with the waterproofing layer, or is it without? So that's on top of the 5, on top of the 6. In addition to the total includes, it consists of the actual stone with the sid, or is it in addition to the sid? It's probable that includes the sid as well. Why? Because if it's extra. Why did the Mishnah mention it? Right? For instance, if it's gazes, it's 5 plus. The fact that we omitted that plus indicates that it's included. So that leads us to the conclusion that hein v'sidan, that includes the sid as well. Perhaps I can say hein b'lei sidan, it's in addition to the sid. The reason why it was not mentioned, because it's a small insignificant addition. It doesn't amount to much. Doesn't get to a tefach leitani, that's why it's not mentioned. But really, it's added to the width as well. Says the Gemara, really? If it's less than a tefach, you don't mention. The Mishnah does speak about amounts which are less than a tefach. B'laveinin, right? Zenoisen tefach hamechza. Right? V'zenoisen tefach hamechza. When they use leveinim for their wall, each fellow contributes 1.5 tefach of his property. So you see, we speak about halves. Well, hasam chazatz arufin there, you're not leaving it at a half. Right? It's 1.5 plus 1.5, which is 3. So it gets you to a full tefach. That's why it's mentioned, but if it's just less than a tefach, at the end, it wouldn't be mentioned. Tashma, it comes a raya. To our shayla. We have a Mishnah in Erevin, hakoiros, of this beam placed over the alleyway to allow carrying inside. So how big is that kaira? How big is that beam? Sha'amru, the kaira that was discussed, ruchava must be big enough to be used for construction. Kadei l'kabel riach, big enough to support a brick. A half a brick, sorry. But riach, what is a riach? Chatzi levein shel gimel tefachim, a half a brick of 3 tefachim. So bottom line, what do we see? How big is a brick? Without the cement, a brick is 3 tefachim. A riach is half that much. So you see that when the Mishnah speaks about a brick being 3 tefachim, right? The wall made of bricks is 3. It means 3 plus the extra coating. Says the Gemara, Hasam b'ravavasa. Perhaps there it's different because we're speaking about a supersized, a max-sized brick. But your standard brick, perhaps, right, is smaller. And only with the extra layer of cement would total 3 tefachim. The economy, I'll even prove that that's the case. that there we're speaking about a max size brick. The Mishnah says the Kaira must sustain, right, the Ariyach, which is half of a brick. I should stop right there. Half a brick. We know what a brick is. A half of a special 3 tefach brick. Oh. Diktani shel shalosh tefachim. What does that tell us? That was speaking about a supersized brick, not a standard brick. Machlal, apparently, the Kazurta is a smaller one as well. And that's what our Mishnah speaks of, the smaller one. Shmamina. So in fact, when we speak about 3 tefachim, it means with the sid added to the brick, and that totals 3 tefachim. Okay, on account of our reference to the Beis HaMikdash Harishon, Beis HaMikdash Hasheni, the Gemara will proceed with a discussion regarding the impressiveness of the second Beis HaMikdash, right, which was greater, bigger, nicer than the first Beis HaMikdash, and how it came about. Amar Rav Chizda lo lister inish bnei kishta. So actually, the Beis HaMikdash discussion will lead us into will relate to something which pertains to even a shul, a halachic consideration pertaining to building a shul, as we're going to see. Amar Rav Chizda lo lister inish bnei kishta. A person should refrain from demolishing a shul. Right? If you want to rebuild a shul, don't first build a new one, right? Don't break this one until you build a new one. Why? For 2 reasons. Some say they might just stop middle of the project. So once you demolish one, you might not get to the next one. Some say practically, you have no place to daven. Might be not any difference between these 2 reasons. There is a difference. Let's say they have another backup shul, a temporary shul. So the second reason doesn't apply, but the first reason does. What did they do? Sasri ubani. They would demolish and rebuild. Bei kaita. They had a summer shul with bigger windows and a winter shul with smaller windows, thicker walls, right? So they would demolish it as the seasons would switch. Sasri ubani. They would demolish and rebuild. Bei kaita. The summer shul besisva in the winter, right? So they would break the summer shul and rebuild it into a winter shul. Ubani besisva bekaita. Come the summer, they would demolish the winter shul and rebuild it into a summer shul. And the Mepharshim explain, because here wasn't just a question of, upgrading the shul. It wasn't really suitable, so that's allowed. So we're concerned about, abandoning the shul mid-construction, right? Let's say Gavu, Zuzi, Umachsi. Let's say they collected their building fund, they put together all the money and sitting right there. There's no reason for us to suspect that they'll stop the project in the middle. So in this case, is it allowed? Could you demolish the shul and then go ahead and rebuild? Amar Leisi says, no, you never know. What might happen midway? Perhaps the residents of this town will encounter a mitzvah pidin shvuyim, redeeming a captive, which is paramount mitzvah, and they'll give away the money from the building fund. They'll be stuck without a shul, if they demolish their first shul before they find a replacement. So what about Shrigi Livni, V'hadar Hudri, Machzik Shuri Mai? Let's say they have all the construction material delivered to the site. The levanim, the bricks are lined up, Shrigi Livni, V'hadar Hudri, the ceiling supports are there, Machzik Shuri, the beams are there. You see, you never know. Again, there might be a mitzvah greater than building a shul. Zimnan de mesramilu pidin shvuyim. Maybe they'll have a pidin shvuyim opportunity. Mazbini, they'll sell the building material. They'll give it to for the mitzvah. So you can't take chances. Hold on to your old shul until the new one is completed. If that's the case, I feel a bananami. So then, even if you really built a new shul, you shouldn't be demolishing the old one. Why? Because you might give it away for a pidin shvuyim. Amarlei, no, he says, no, dirse de inshi, a person's own private residence. You don't sell that. Some Farshim explain you're not allowed to sell it. So at that point you're safe. V'lei amar, this whole halacha that we don't demolish until we have the replacement is only elad lechazi but you. They didn't notice a crack or something that making this building unsuitable for dwelling. Aval chazi but you, let's say the building is precarious, it's falling apart. Sashri, but in this case, you can demolish it and then go ahead and build. As we find, Yehadar of Ashi, who lived in Mata Machasya, he noticed some structural defect in the shul of Mata Machasya, Sastre, so he demolished it, and they started rebuilding, but in order to ensure completion, you know what he did? He imported his own bed, into the shul. So he gets the rain and everything. This way, he'll know that they'll finish the shul. It's a guaranteed proposition. But he refused to move out. He didn't bring his bed out until they affixed the downspouts, the eave troughs and downspouts to channel away the water. Until they totally finished the project, he stayed in there, and this really guaranteed completion. Okay, so that takes us to the next shayla, which relates to the Beis HaMikdash. Bava ben Buta, this tzaddik Bava ben Buta, heichi azbei le'etz lehurdus. So how did he indeed give hurdus advice? L'mistre the Beis HaMikdash, to destroy to knock down the Beis HaMikdash when he wanted to rebuild it and make it nicer and bigger. You're not allowed to do that. From Rav Chizda, we just learned. Before you build the new shul, before you demolish the old one, make sure the new one's ready. So you have several terutzim. Yiboy is saying, one pshat, there was some real serious structural defect in Beis HaMikdash which required him to do so. Yiboy is saying, another pshat, malchusa shani, the authorities are different. A malach, he'll carry out his word, he keeps his promise. He doesn't go back on his promise. If he committed himself to rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash, it's going to happen. So here there's no concern. Shmuel says, if the kingdom says, right? If the Malchus says they're going to uproot the mountain, they're going to build a highway, right? He's going to do it, he's not going to change his mind. So here there's no concern. So how did this whole story with Hurdus come about? What was he doing building the Beis HaMikdash? Who was he? Says the more Hurdus was really a slave, an Avda, the Beis Chashmonai Hava. So this fellow Hurdus was an Eved, a non-Jewish slave, an Eved Kanani, in the Chashmonai family, in the Chashmonai royal Chashmonai household. So they were the leaders, they were the Kehanim. Avda the Beis Chashmonai Hava. It so happens that Nosan Einov, he got attracted to one of their daughters, Boisatinoikis, Yom Echad. And one day he hears, some say the stargazers sent him a message, and he gets wind of the fact that today is a lucky day. Shama Hahugavra, so this fellow Hurdus, here's this Baskala, a Baskar, some say it doesn't literally mean a Baskar, it means he got this intuition, this advice from the experts, the Omar. So the message was, Kol Avdo de Morid Hashta, any slave that rebels today, right, against his master, Matzlach, he will succeed. He sees the opportunity come, Katlin L'Kulam Arvasei. He got up and he killed out all his masters, his whole family, the whole Chashmonai household. But he left over this daughter, Vishayra, Ayenukta, and when she saw what was about to happen, she was a Kehanes, and he was an Eved, it's forbidden, right? Ki Chazas Ayenukta, the Kamoy Lebinspa. When she saw that he intended on marrying her, Salika Igra, Varama Kala, she went up to the rooftop and she called out, Amra, she says, Kol Manda Osi V'Amar, going forward, anybody who pretends, who claims, who purports that he belongs to the Chashmonai family, he's a liar. Manda Osi V'Amar Mi Beis Chashmonai Kasina, I hail from the Chashmonai household. Avdu, you should know he's really a slave because the girl, she said about herself, I'm the only sole survivor. And what happened to her? She's speaking. Nafla Miyugular. That she fell off the roof and she died. There's a Girsa Umesa, and Farshim explained because she was afraid of doing an Avera. So basically, going forward, you should know that when anybody pretends to be from the royal family is a liar. Tamna Sheva Shnin Bedufsha. What did Hurdus do? He took her and he preserved her in honey for 7 years. Ikadamri, some say Ba'ala, he lived with her physically. Ikadamri Leibala, he didn't. Da'amri La Ba'ala, those who say that he did. Hada Tamna, the reason why he preserved it, to satisfy his desire. Da'amri La, and the other version that says Loi Ba'ala, he did not get close to her. Hada Tamna, the reason why he did this. This way he can sort of identify and relate to the royal family, the number of people will say, yeah, Bas Melech Nasa, he married a Bas Melech, he'll purport that she was really his wife, and this is what happened, and he'll consider himself having married into the royal family. Omar, so one day he's thinking to himself, Man dorish mikerev achecha tosem olecha melech. We have a pasuk. From amongst your brethren, you should appoint a king. And the Rabbanan were the ones who expounded on this, and they learned that mikerev achecha disqualifies an eved. And he felt threatened. Come katlinu l'kluraron. He killed out. He wiped out all the chachamim to remove this threat, because he wanted to maintain his reign, and they're going to threaten him. Shavke l'Bava ben Buta, but he left over one chacham Bava ben Buta l'mishka eitzu b'nei, who can serve as his senior advisor, as we're going to see, and this led to the upgrading of the Beis Hamikdash, which is why we're learning this topic altogether. Okay, let's recap today's daf. We discussed Hezek Riyah, Machlekes, whether we say Shmei Hezek, Lo Shmei Hezek, 2 ways to learn the Mishnah. We learned about the various materials used to construct the wall, the various thicknesses required as per various heights, and that took us into the halacha, the phenomenon of the Amatraxim, the Beis Hamikdash, which in the first Beis Hamikdash was made of wall material. In the second Beis Hamikdash was too tall for that. They need to use curtain material. We went into explaining the din of the Mishnah, the dimensions which are they inclusive of the Sid or not, and we weren't sure about that, but at the end of the day we said that it is inclusive of the Sid. One should first build the new basement, the replacement, before he destroys the old one, to ensure continuity. And that took us into the story of Hurdus with upgrading of the Beis Hamikdash. All the best to you, Surus Teves, and Atzlacha Rabbah.